A big update on President Biden's fourth stimulus package, everybody. Joe Manchin has announced his new agreement with Chuck Schumer, and progressive lawmakers have proposed mailing inflation to relief checks. Now, these checks may be sent out to low-income households, Social Security beneficiaries, and even families. You want to be sure to stay until the end of the video to know if you can receive the latest stimulus check from President Biden. Congress is planning on taking big action this week, as they are now in session, and Joe Manchin of West Virginia is already holding meetings with other lawmakers to finally close a deal. According to NBC News, alongside Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska, Joe Manchin held a meeting on climate initiatives. This was an effort to see whether a bipartisan deal can be cut with Republicans. Manchin has told reporters, "If I can find something bipartisan, we don't need reconciliation." Democrats have been using for over a year, allowing them to bypass the 60-vote threshold to end a potential filibuster. He later added that one area of shared interest could be overhauling the federal oil and gas leasing program. "It's urgent to find out if there's a pathway," he said. "If there's any way, then we can find a pathway in a bipartisan way." Now, a spokesperson for Manchin said the meeting was an effort to gauge bipartisan interest in a path forward that addresses our nation's climate and energy security heads-on. The progressive lawmakers are also trying to come up with an agreement with Manchin. House Representative Ro Khanna said in a statement that passing a bold bill is his highest priority, and he was pleased to participate with colleagues on finding a way forward. Joe Manchin has voiced support in recent months for a package centered on clean energy spending, cutting prescription prices, and rolling back the 2017 Republican tax cuts. Democrats hope to cut a deal with Manchin on the bill as soon as possible. Some of the Democratic Party are pushing to strike an agreement on their priorities by Memorial Day. Inflation has been rising at a clip not seen in 4 decades, pushing up prices on just about everything and eating into household finances. To help residents grappling with the increased cost as a result of crisis-driven inflation, the Maine legislature passed a budget that included relief checks for Mainers. An estimated 850,000 residents will be eligible for the extra cash to help cover the increased cost of things, ranging from higher energy costs to increased prices for everyday goods. Governor Janet Mills' proposal was passed overwhelmingly by the state legislature, which will return half of the budget surplus to the taxpayers for a total of $729.3 million. Unlike last year's relief program, which was a thank you to Mainers who worked during the early days of the crisis, there is no wage requirement this time around. The state expects to send out checks to approximately 333,000 more residents through this program. Only full-time Maine residents that file a 2021 Maine individual income tax return and meet the income thresholds will receive the $850 inflation relief checks. Although the tax filing deadline has passed, Mainers can still submit a tax return to access the boost to their finances. However, they only have until October 31st, 2022. Also, those eligible must not be claimed as dependent on another filer's tax return. According to the state, Mainers can expect to start receiving the first round of checks arrive in their mailboxes this summer. Maine Revenue Services will send out subsequent rounds on a rolling basis through the end of the year as tax returns are received. Now, the U.S. economy shrank by 1.4% in the most recent quarter, decreasing for the first time since the crisis-induced recession 2 years ago. According to government data released today, surging inflation amid persistent labor shortages continues to plummet the nation's economy. The latest figures are stoking concerns that the U.S. may be on the verge of a recession, although spending by businesses and consumers, which is the main driver of the U.S. economy, rose 3.7%, adjusting for inflation. Unemployment is at a 3.6% close to the pre-crisis record lows. Wages are rising steadily as companies compete to attract and retain workers, a trend that has helped many customers maintain the ability to spend. But inflation is squeezing households as gas prices and food prices spike. Jerome Powell has also signaled a rapid series of rate increases to combat higher prices. The Fed is set to raise its key short-term rate by 0.5% next week, in the first hike that large since 2000. At least 2 more half-point increases are expected at the next Fed meetings. That would amount to one of the fastest series of Fed rate hikes in a decade. Folks, we have a ton of good news with the fourth stimulus check, Social Security benefits, and SSDI and SSI news. So you want to continue watching this video to find out the most important stimulus check information.
And with her and her family, and I appreciate very much that relationship. And we have you back to the committee to discuss the President Biden's fiscal year 2023 budget request for the Department of Energy. So I want to thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today. The ongoing crisis in Ukraine is severe. Putin has used energy as a weapon to leverage power over European democracy and intends to do the same globally, using Russia's abundant energy resources. So far, the U.S. has taken significant steps to counter Putin's aggression, including banning the import of Russian oil, petroleum products, LNG, and coal, while also authorizing additional LNG export capacity. These are critical moves to stop funding Putin's brutal war on the Ukrainian people, but there is more that we can do and we must do. In a time when maintaining and strengthening our energy security is top of mind, I look forward to hearing more about how the administration's budget requests will help us achieve that goal. At the same time, the department's efforts to advance critical clean energy technologies from solar to nuclear energy and storage continue to transform the U.S. economy and reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. And you have some pretty historic new authorities and funding levels with which to do that. This committee's work product, the Energy Act of 2020, established new pathways for research and development across the energy landscape. The bipartisan infrastructure law we passed late last year was a critical step to enable us to be a leader in innovating energy technology and supplying our partners with our abundant resources. The infrastructure law provides an all-of-the-above investment and innovation, not elimination, including funding for carbon capture, utilization, and storage, hydrogen, critical minerals, transmission, energy efficiencies, clean energy manufacturing, and so much more. The Department of Energy is overseeing the implementation of $62 billion of this funding. Secretary Granholm, as you saw when you visited West Virginia in March, there is so much excitement around programs like the hydrogen hubs and the many other programs from the infrastructure law that will have an enormous impact on my state of West Virginia, but a lot of states throughout the country. We want to ensure you have all the tools and personnel you need to get that money out the door efficiently and effectively, and I look forward to hearing about the progress the department has made in implementing this historic legislation. I was glad to see several West Virginia priorities included in the department's budget request. The request includes $502 million for weatherization assistance program, which helps low-income families make lasting energy efficiency improvements to their homes, and I can tell you everyone on this committee will benefit by that, freeing up finite resources for other essentials like food and medicine. I'm pleased to see an increase in funding for Weatherization Readiness Fund, which was funded for the first time last year and will help low-income families make the repairs to their homes that are necessary to qualify for weatherization dollars. The request also supports the National Energy Technology Laboratory, headquartered in Morgantown, West Virginia, although I think this is an area of underinvestment, as you would well imagine. We are so proud of the work that Brian Anderson, Dr. Anderson, and his team do to keep us on the cutting edge of energy innovation, especially technologies that will help us reduce carbon emissions without sacrificing reliability and energy security. We also can't sacrifice the rural economies that have produced our energy for decades.